No portion of this podcast may be utilized or reproduced in any manner without written permission, except in cases of quotations used in critical articles or reviews.
And they're high school kids. So
Yeah.
normally, and I warned them well before I played this. I'm like, listen, this is not your rap music that you're listening to these days. This is no Cardi B. This isn't Rod Wave. Like, this isn't. But they actually engaged in it. I mean, they were paying attention.
Yeah.
It's a cartoon. It's conjunction, junction, what's your function? And they actually were like tapping their fingers and tapping their toes. And, you know, they were engaged in it. And they I would even catch one or two of them still kind of humming this tune after it was over.
Yeah.
And so it just goes to show some of those old tricks from
they still work.
tools from back, they still work. They still can be put into play. And I think teachers need to remember that. What worked for us when we were young can still work for the young people today.
Join the conversation with Summer Keith to learn more about personal improvement, family life, and learning to live in today's challenging world.
Join the conversation.
Welcome to Join the Conversation with Summer Keith, where we will be discussing just a myriad of different topics that are going to be all relatable to all of our viewers. And topics ranging from education to home life, to relationships, maybe even a little bit political, but, you know, we'll just see how things flow. Today we have as our guest, it's Savanna Izuga, who is a high school teacher, and she is dealing with today's issues and challenges in education. So what are the different subjects that you teach, or subject that you teach?
So I teach ninth grade English. I also teach English honors in ninth grade as well. So most of my classes are largely ELA, what we call ELA, which
English
is language arts.
Uh-huh.
Yes. And I also do ninth grade, 10th grade, 11th grade, 12th grade basketball for girls. So varsity basketball coach. So that's a lot of fun as well.
And very exciting.
It's very exciting.
And you're drained at the end of the day.
Absolutely. It keeps you on your toes.
Yeah.
The kids keep me on my toes.
In every way.
Yes.
So just so some of my viewers know, I also am retired, but I taught high school and middle school in Title I schools, and your school is a Title I Tier 1.
That is correct.
Tell our audience about that, because it's really important to know.
Yeah, absolutely. So Title I essentially means that we receive funding for the government in order for our kids to have better resources for their education. The Tier 1 part of that means that we also receive money from the government, federal money, in order to give to our staff to help us stay staffed and have resources for the staff as well. I would consider it an inner city school for sure. Yes.
And it does help. So a couple of times I worked under a grant and with my special ed as a consultative special ed teacher, and it's important. So do you have maybe a little anecdotal story that you would like to share with us?
Oh my goodness.
I mean, you got thousands of them, I'm sure. I do too. I miss teaching, I have to say.
Absolutely. The kids are more, I would say, vibrant and outgoing than ever before. I don't know if it's the new age of social media. I don't know if it's just post-COVID life, but we deal with a wide range of different personalities every day. And there's always something happening. I have kids that they literally keep me on my toes to the point where sometimes they say such funny things that I'll physically write them down and keep them at my desk because it keeps a smile on my face, you know. But yeah, I mean, specifically, it's hard. I mean, there's so many stories that go through my mind when I think of, you know, at day-to-day life with high school kids today.
I remember going into school every single day myself, and we've talked about this before too, that it was like going into a room with celebrities because, so I would have other people, and I'm sure there's even people that you know, friends or whatever, that will say something like, they'll say something like, oh, how do you do that? You know, you're dealing with those kids and they're this and they're that and they're dangerous or whatever. Well, I guess they can be. But I loved the energy, right? And it would bounce back off. And I also, I was teaching in Atlanta, so I remember walking down the halls, and sometimes these kids would be breakdancing in the middle of the hall.
Absolutely. Well, now
I
it's
wouldn't
changed.
stop them either because it was fun to watch. Wow, that's pretty cool. What class you're supposed to be in right now?
Exactly. But now instead of breakdancing, it's TikTok.
Yeah.
So
yeah.
anywhere that they can find a door ledge or a panel that they can prop their phone up, they are full on TikTok dances, and I cannot keep up. But they're great. I mean, they like you said, talented balls of energy.
Yeah.
And it really does keep you on your toes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, there has to be more order in the classroom because you also know, I know you know this, but it's usually like maybe 5% or 6% of the students in the entire class, because so many times people say, well, the whole class is disrupted. That's not really true. A lot of times it's 5 or 6%. The rest of the kids are just like, waiting for you to entertain them. I remember, in fact, some of my students would tell me, you're not very entertaining, Miss Duran. And I'm like, well, I'm supposed to be teaching. We can laugh and play later. But actually, there has to be a little bit of entertainment because their attention span was getting smaller and smaller and smaller to the point where, don't you agree?
Almost. Oh, absolutely. So nowadays in the classroom, the thing that is really, you do have to keep their attention a lot. The thing that is really difficult is for them to not use their cell phones.
Yeah.
So you may start out with, please put your phones away, have them out of sight. And it may be a matter of just 5 minutes before they forget that they're not supposed to have their phones, and
they don't forget.
Yeah, they conveniently forget.
It's like, oh, I forgot. No, you did not.
Yeah, exactly. So it's a constant reminder. And that's one of those things where when you talk about a short attention span, that you really have to continually remind the students, not to put their phones down, to pay attention, to, and participation has become a real grade nowadays. I mean, sometimes you hear teachers say, this will be a grade for your participation. Well, you really have to make it a real grade because if not, they will lose that interest and they will kind of just brush off their participation in class, or they're paying attention.
So teaching honors English, we used to call AP
back in the day. That's what it was when I was in school. Now they call it honors. Yeah, it's different than teaching the regular general population of students. And I think that my honors students, they tend to be more engaged. The way we do honors in our schooling is based off of test scores. So how they tested in the previous year in English would decide whether or not they would be in the honors
What about their
course.
GPA? Does it have anything to do with their overall GPA?
From what I understand, no. It's just based off of their English test scores. And it shows. I mean, these are generally kids that are reading at a higher level. These are kids that do generally have better grades in English or in my specific subject. And these are kids that tend to be more engaged. They do tend to participate more in class. And it's a really a breath of fresh air to do honors because... And I hold them to that standard. I tell them, you are in honors. I expect this of you, being my honors students. And they really do.
Yeah, they'll step up to the plate because kids need to be challenged. That's the one thing, if I can speak up and say that, when people complain, I'm such an advocate of kids. When you hear people complaining, well, the kids today, this and that, well, maybe they're not being challenged enough in an honorable and noble way. They're being challenged to live their life because really the world kind of sucks for our young people today. And I hate to see it because I'm much older now. I'm old enough to be a grandma. I have really seen, and education interested me since I was 5 and 6 years old. I couldn't wait to be at school. And they even wanted to skip me to a higher grade because I just love being in a school environment. But parents also, I know there's a lot of really great parents, but a lot of parents are not challenging their kids either.
I would agree.
I know you would agree.
Yeah, absolutely.
You can always tell the kids who have the parental environment and parental support. And by the way, I'm on a roll now.
Go ahead.
Keep going.
Yeah, keep going.
But by the way, and you know this too, that a lot of times when people think parents, like they're some kind of a demigod that really has their act together, that is not true.
No.
Most of the time it's the mom, grandma, or auntie, especially in the Title I schools, right?
Yes, that is correct.
And if you have parents calling. Do you ever get a dad calling?
I've never, and I've been in this particular school system for over 2 years, 2.5, it'll be 2.5 years after
Yeah.
this year. And now I've had dads show up to, like, say, our open house where we
Yeah.
meet the parents at the beginning of the year.
Mhm.
But as far as calling and checking on grades or emailing, no.
Mhm.
It's if it does happen, it's the mother, and it doesn't
Right.
usually ever, or grandmother, like you said,
Mhm.
it doesn't ever come from a father figure, which is
Yeah.
unfortunate. I mean, I
Yeah.
think these days it would be nice to have more fathers and just
Mhm.
parents in general involvement in their students, lives, and when it comes to schooling.
Right.
And so yeah, it's something that definitely should be better.
Kids are
Needs to be
feeling
improved upon.
insecure just about their own lives, and not to be negative or negatory or whatever, but we've had these school shootings. To me, when growing up, and you too, because you're younger than me, but were you ever afraid that there might be a school shooting that day at a church or
It
a
was
school or
never
Walmart
thought
or
of.
post office or something?
Never thought of.
These were safe zones to be in at
Mhm.
all times.
Mhm.
And literally, my heart goes out. Well, that's why I'm doing this show. That's why I have people like you.
Mhm.
It goes out to our young people, because our young people are, guess what? They are the future.
Absolutely.
And we better
Absolutely.
start taking better care of our kids. We do need to be the village,
Absolutely.
I know you
Absolutely.
are a village in yourself.
Yeah, I definitely try to be. I try to be a force on
Mhm.
campus.
Yeah.
I really try to give off just the positivity, the happy-go-lucky
Yeah.
nature.
Uh-huh.
But it's very difficult. I talk to other teachers, fellow teachers, and staff members all the time about how we are trying to change the dynamic. We're
Mhm.
trying to change the energy, the way that kids think about
Yeah.
school and feel about school, but it's
Mhm.
not easy. It goes back to what we just
Mhm.
said about parent
Right.
involvement and having that same kind of thing brought from the
Right.
parent's perspective as
Mhm.
well, and being told at home that this is important and you should act this way when you're at school. And
Right.
it's just something that I feel is very lacking right now.
I remember my colleagues in Atlanta. We all worked together at middle school and, like I said, Title I school and high school.
Mhm.
And I remember the teachers that were about to retire like me, and a lot of them, they said, these new kids these days, they said, they don't get any home training,
Yeah. Yeah.
and they said it's
Yeah.
so different,
Mm-hmm.
because before you might have parents that knew that, they themselves didn't have that much of an education, and they might not be able to even help their kids
Yes.
when it gets past grammar school or elementary school, like
Mhm.
middle school and high school, especially in areas of, well, every area, English or whatever. Um, and so they would actually feel like the teacher was a support system and back and forth, and
Yes.
that was the village. But then
Mhm.
some of the parents nowadays, or parent, they feel threatened by the teacher.
There you go.
It's just there's all this division, and
Mm-hmm.
so guess who is going to suffer from this? The kids.
Yeah, absolutely. And I would like to see that more. I wish that there were more of a positive dichotomy between the parents and the teachers,
Mhm.
and staff in general. I think
Yeah.
if there were programs put into place that harbored
Mhm.
positive relationships between the parents and the teachers, to where the parents don't feel like they don't know what's being taught, to where the parents don't feel like they don't know what's going on in a classroom, I think it would greatly help.
Yeah.
The relationships, and when parents and teachers feel like they're more on the same page,
Mhm.
kind of like a mom and a dad.
Yeah.
If
Yeah.
you know that your mom's going to say
Mhm.
no, well, don't go ask mom, go ask dad.
Yeah.
And so
They're playing one against the other.
playing one against the
Uh-huh.
other. So instead of that, if they
Mhm.
could put on a more of a front between the parents and the teachers, it would just, I think, really change the course of
Right.
direction for a lot of these kids that
Yeah.
are failing, and it
Mhm.
wouldn't pit, like you said, pit
Mhm.
one against the other. So that's something that I would love to see. It would be a positive change if we could get more interactions between the teachers
Yeah.
and the parents that were on a more positive. If the parents could more understand the teachers, and the
Mhm.
teachers could better understand the parents,
How do you
we'd
think
be
we
in a
could
better
do
place.
that? Do you have any
Well,
ideas?
we have to implement programs. We
Yeah.
have to implement, well, one thing I would suggest is to bring back parent-teacher conferences.
Right.
I know that some schools still implement them, but there are other schools that do, once you get to a high school level, they no longer offer those
Yeah.
types of things. It's kind of up to the parent to reach out to the teacher or vice versa.
Right.
Sometimes when I'm reaching out to parents, whether that be via email or on the phone, oftentimes parents are busy. They're at work, even after school.
Or working 2 jobs.
Correct.
Yeah.
Even after school hours. Yeah. Well, it's after hours for me, but it's not after hours for this parent that's
Right.
working maybe till
Yeah.
5, 6, 8 o'clock at night. So I think if we could, implement some programs to where it would be easier for the parents and teachers to communicate with each other, and have some positive communication to where parents could ask questions of the teachers and the teachers could, do the same. It would be a lot easier. I've actually had parents reach out to me and say, "Are you allowed to take away my kid's cell phone if I give you permission?" Well,
Yeah.
of course I am.
Yeah.
If you give me permission, of course I can take their cell phone away.
Yeah.
So things like that
Mhm.
should be improved in
Right.
today's school systems, for sure.
And see, that wouldn't cost any money.
No.
So you hear people say, well, it's just going to cost more money. And, they get all disheartened. There's a lot of things you can do, and a lot of things I've done, a lot of things you've done, and your co-teachers too,
Yes.
with our students that didn't cost a dime. All it cost is
It's a little time.
and some wisdom and
Yes.
taking on some patience and trying to figure it out.
Mhm.
But good Lord,
Yeah.
I really have seen insanity
Yeah.
when it comes to running school systems and what people perceive as being really important, which is not. We've even
Yeah.
talked about that
Yeah.
before.
Absolutely.
I believe that there needs to be, some reparations going.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Some reforms. Yeah,
Yeah.
for sure. And that kind of brings us to our next point, which talking about, just overall behavior when it comes to students. I don't think I don't think parents are aware of their children's behavior in schools nowadays. It's not
No.
like it used to be. It's
No.
just not. We have so many students that are not going to class. They're skipping class. And it's funny because they're not skipping school.
No.
They're skipping class.
Yeah.
Which means
They
they're
like to stay in the
on
shelter of the
campus.
school. Yeah.
Correct. So they're still wandering the halls or hiding out somewhere,
Mhm.
but they're not in class. And that's a big issue that we've dealt with over the past few years. And we've also dealt with horrible, um, they call it, habitual absenteeism.
Right.
And that has been a very big struggle in the current school system that I am in. As a matter of fact, they actually sent out an email saying that we were currently at a 34% habitual abs, and they said, "Good job, it's down
Oh
from
my
where
God.
it was." Like they were literally
That
congratulating
is 1/3
us.
of the entire school
It's- yeah,
population.
yes, correct.
But the pandemic, I think, has pushed
Was
it
a
over.
catalyst for that.
Because that's where kids. I have 2 friends that are PhD leadership people in Atlanta
Mhm.
who were telling me that it could take up to 2 years. See, this is what folks
Mhm.
don't know.
Yes.
It's like, oh, it's just a pandemic. It's
Yeah.
going to take up to 2 years for some of these kids to get back on track if they come back to school.
Correct.
It's really horrendous. And
Yes.
let's not forget, I don't mean to sound redundant, but these are our future. What is our future going to be like?
Mhm.
It pulls, it just takes the wind out of the sails of the kids, because raising children is very difficult. It's always been difficult, even in the
Yes.
Stone Age. It's just
Yeah.
it's just a difficult thing.
Yes, absolutely.
But now it's far more difficult.
yeah, it
It's-
ain't getting any easier.
It's
as
like
they say.
being on a ship in rough seas for these kids, and so many of them would be just fine if there was a lot more stability
Mhm.
in all those factions of life.
Absolutely.
And I mean, it really does. I mean, you've known me long enough. I just get, I wouldn't say upset, but sort of rattled when folks say, well, it's just these, every time I hear somebody say kids these days, I just want to, well, I'm not going to tell you what.
Yeah, I feel you though. That's true.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's so
Because
true.
once you get to know your students, it's like a big family, that classroom.
Absolutely. Absolutely. There are kids that I absolutely love.
Yeah.
Love being around.
Yeah.
So, and they love me. I mean,
Mhm.
so much so that our lunches are no longer dedicated to us. Our
No.
lunches are open door policy
Yeah.
where kids come
They want to
in.
sit with you and they tell you stuff that, oh my Lord, you know.
Yes, they tell you all their business as
Yeah.
their hot tea,
Yeah.
as we
Oh,
say.
yeah.
You know, they spill the hot tea.
Yeah. Well, because they're still figuring out life.
Mm-hmm.
You know, I
Yes,
still have a
yes.
vivid memory. I think a lot of adults don't, you know,
Mhm,
but you know
yes.
how old I am, but I'm not going to tell anybody how old I am. But I do remember things very succinctly. I just have a really sharp, they used to call it a photographic memory, I guess,
Yes.
from the time even 4 and 5 years old. But I remember the feelings that I felt when I was a teenager, when I was 13, 14, 15, 16 years old. I remember certain songs, you know, when you hear a song and it brings you right back.
Right back
You
to
know?
a place and time.
Or
yeah.
you smell something like a certain perfume. Oh, well, Miss Lane was wearing that. Oh,
Yeah.
yeah, now I remember, you know. So those ages, and I think you know this, and I know this because I took adolescent psych for kids and, you know, all this Asperger's and learned all this stuff.
Mm-hmm.
But ages, approximately the ages from 13 up to about 23 to 24, 25 is where your memory is the strongest and where your impressions are going to be the strongest.
Correct.
Because your past childhood and you start putting these blocks of information together where you're
Mhm.
understanding more about relationships and life and why does this happen, and then you're aware of things like war or whatever, you know.
Mhm. Oh, yeah.
And what you
Yeah.
remember, like 13, 14, 15, 16, I would really examine my teachers and I would notice things that I don't even notice nowadays, you know.
Yeah. Yeah.
Like maybe, you know, I had a math teacher and his pants were real short and we would just giggle and laugh about that. Nowadays, some old man walking around with these short, you know, like what did they say about invite your pants to the party or something like that, you know?
Yeah,
Because-
ours was always, well, it's the high waters.
The
thing.
high waters.
Yeah, the high waters.
And
Yeah. Are
we
you
would just-
preparing for a flood?
Yeah.
That was it.
And it would be so bizarre to see these little things because when you're a
Yeah.
kid, so adults and older people remember that you're being checked out, not only how you dress and how you talk,
Mhm.
but your actions, your
Mhm.
attitudes,
Mhm.
you know, they're
Absolutely.
watching you.
Absolutely.
And if you're acting foolish,
yeah.
you know, then they're going to think, well, if they're acting foolish, I guess that's the way you're supposed to act.
Right. Yeah, they're highly aware. They're
Yeah.
highly aware
Mhm.
of what's going on and what, like you were saying, of actions, or just like if what you say is
Mhm.
matching what you're doing as
Yeah.
a teacher and as an adult in the school
Mhm.
systems. And they're very quick to let you know or
Yeah.
to let someone else know, like, I'm not going to listen to that teacher
Mhm.
anymore, that person anymore, because they contradicted what they said, or they,
Yeah.
you know, things
They
like
can't trust you.
Yeah, exactly.
Uh-huh.
They feel they can no longer
Have you ever had
trust
any
you.
kids say anything about if you changed your hair up or you wore a different dress or something, make a comment about?
Oh, yeah. So as you can tell, I wear glasses.
Yeah.
Every day I wear glasses.
Uh-huh.
And one day I accidentally forgot them. Oh my God. Is something wrong with you today, miss? You don't look okay. I'm like, I'm thinking like, do I have something in my teeth, my face? Like, what's going on? And it was because I forgot my glasses one
Yeah.
day. And then one kid actually said it. He said, you forgot your glasses today, didn't you? And I said, yes, I did. And I said, why do you say that? Do I look funny? And he's like, yeah. You know, he just straight up.
They'll blurt out whatever.
Yeah. So they're very
Uh-huh.
highly aware. They,
Yeah.
you know,
They're very observant.
They are. And they're smart kids. It's just
Mhm.
a shame that, you know, I wish that there were more investment in our kids in general.
Mhm.
And I wish that, you know, that existed overall, whether that be the parents or the teachers or just staff in general. And I wish that the students had more investment in their own education.
Yeah.
I wish that they wanted to succeed even more so than, like, it's almost as if the grade is no longer the reward. Like it
Mhm.
used to, like straight A's was like something to really strive for and go after. And nowadays it seems like, well, they're okay with a C or
Yeah.
they're okay with a B. Like a B
Yeah,
is
they're
good.
just settling for less
Correct.
when they can go
will
so much further.
Correct. Yes. And I see that every day. I'm like, you do realize that a very small effort can be put to change your 79 into an 80 or your
Yeah.
89 into a 90, but they don't see, well, a B is good to them. So they
Yeah.
don't see what's the point in the 90. And I try to reinforce to my students all the time that your transcript
Mhm.
follows you forever.
Yeah.
I tell them that all the time. I tell them your transcript, I used my high school transcript to become this
Mhm.
teacher, to get this job. And I tell them all the time, I'm 34 years old.
Yeah.
And so can you imagine that what I did when I was 15 in school
Right.
in your ages is affecting me now?
Mhm.
And I try to reiterate that to
Mhm.
them and just drill that in their heads because I want them to understand that the better that your high school
Mhm.
transcript looks means the better college that you can get in, the better jobs that you will receive one day. And I just don't think, it's really hard with young kids
And it
because
develops pride.
absolutely. But it's really hard with young kids because they only see the present moment, the
Mhm.
now, what's right
Well,
in
yeah.
front of them.
Yeah.
It's hard for them to look into
Yeah.
the future. It's
Mhm.
hard for them to, even when we do assignments, or we did an assignment at the very beginning of my English class, which was to talk about your future self. Write a letter to your future
Okay.
self.
Yeah, that's a good one.
And where do you see yourself
Mhm.
10 years from now?
Right.
And many of them answered, I don't know. I don't care. I'm not thinking of that. And then oftentimes there were even answers that were negative. Some students would say, oh, probably homeless. That was their
That's
answer
awful.
for where they saw themselves. And it's like, why are
Mm.
we aiming so
Yeah.
low? I mean, you're 15, you have the whole world and your whole life
Yeah.
in front of you.
That's what I'm talking about.
Why would you
That's-
have that
Mhm.
outlook this early, on in life? And so it's unfortunate. And those are the things that I wish were just,
Yeah.
drilled a little harder
they
at
shouldn't-
home and at
especially at that young, I mean, they're not even as old as you are or I am.
school.
Yeah, and it takes so long to for the maturation process,
Mhm.
and also creating a routine in the system
Yes.
and self-development, self-discipline, so that you
Yes.
can rely on those attributes when
Mhm.
times really get to be challenging.
Yes.
So
Absolutely.
this whole concept of just getting by
Mhm.
or hoping, you just have this influx of money. Well, if you have an influx of money and you don't have any kind of direction, you won't be able to be a good steward of that money. You'll
Correct.
just blow it on all kinds of,
Yeah.
wrong
Well,
things.
I'm glad you brought up money too, because that's another thing that is very still very sought after when it comes to young people. They all want to make good money. They all want to have, it's money. They don't really
Mhm.
talk about having the good job to have
Yeah.
good money. It's more of just want to make money.
Right.
And they don't understand the in between.
Yeah.
You start here and the
Mhm.
money's there.
Right.
There's a
Mhm.
whole lot of work that has to happen
Right.
in between there and there,
Mhm.
and they don't really grasp those concepts.
No.
And that's something else that needs to be, understood and reiterated.
Yeah.
Yeah, for sure.
Well, and they're hearing tapes, as we used to call them, tapes running in their head about what their parents are saying.
Yes.
Instead of instead of having some enthusiasm and
Mhm.
creating some real dreams and goals and setting goals and then
Mhm.
working toward those goals,
Mhm.
because that's what would keep me going, because I
Yes.
didn't have like the perfect upbringing. I had some great advantages, but I had a lot of disadvantages too.
Yes.
But I was always, I mean, I was just born very ambitious.
Yes.
And I loved to see what's on the other side of the mountain, or whatever.
Yeah.
And I wasn't the boy crazy. I
No.
couldn't
Yeah.
give a flip about that.
Mhm.
But when you start instilling how important, like I remember telling my classroom, and this was 9, 10 years ago, I'd say the same thing. I say, my heart goes out to you. I said, because the world is not always as welcoming to young people as it was when I was growing up.
Mhm.
People were a little bit more open and supportive.
Correct. Yes.
Because I see the shift. I pay
Yeah.
attention to everything.
Yeah.
I still have
Yeah.
that adolescent brain. I'm still observing it.
Yeah. Yeah.
But our children overall need to feel that they fit in. They need to
Mhm.
feel that they are that they have a purpose,
Correct.
and that it's more important to think of yourself as having a purpose than trying to gain material items all the time, because that's only going to
That's it.
take you so far.
Right. And
Mhm.
that's exactly right. And that's something that I don't think they quite grasp that concept. And it's not all students. There are some students that really do see a bright future for themselves, that want a lot in
Mhm.
life, and they
Mhm.
know that it will take hard work. They have
Yeah.
goals.
Mhm.
They strive to have a good jobs. But then there's a large mass majority of them that don't quite have that part of it
Mhm.
figured out. So it's something that, I think needs to be talked about more. It needs to be
Right.
worked on.
Mhm.
It's something that needs to be paid attention to,
Right.
for sure. especially when it comes from us adults.
And that just made me think of something else too, is, parents and society as a whole expecting that schools are going to be delivering all of that for your kids. Let's stop thinking about in those terms. That
Yes.
is so negative and backward. And
Mhm.
frankly, it's very ignorant to be thinking that, because I blog a lot. I blog a lot. And I write a
Yeah.
lot.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
I've even published, a couple of books, 3 books. And but who's counting, right?
Exactly.
But what I find, and I've been told, well, they don't teach stuff at school like that. And I'm like, I love it when somebody says that and I'm in the room,
Yeah. Oh,
because
yeah.
I'll say, for one thing, I'll say, well, not only do we actually teach that, but if
Mhm.
your child is not, participating, or if he or she is not paying attention, then
Mhm.
that is on him and it's on you as a parent. It
Mhm.
really is.
It is.
Because we can't, we can just present the information.
Correct.
And just out of curiosity, my brain, I'm a little ADD, if you haven't noticed. I
No,
am.
good. Yeah. No, that's
But
good,
that's
though.
okay.
Yeah.
I've accepted it. But how many times have you, like in a classroom and you're talking to your kids, have you had them be like telling you, well, that's too much homework, or you're too strict or something?
Well, that's the thing about nowadays, I don't give homework.
See, that's
The
what I wanted to hear.
only homework my students have is the work that they choose to instead be on their phones instead of in class working. Every assignment thing that I give is plenty of
Mhm.
time within the 50 minutes,
Yeah.
sometimes class time that we have. However, like you just said, if you basically are choosing not to pay attention, if you're choosing
Mhm.
not to do your work,
Mhm.
if you do not use your time wisely, as I tell them all the
Yeah.
time, then yeah, you're going to end up with homework, because
Right.
if you didn't get it done in
Mhm.
class, it goes home
Yeah.
with you. But as far as like back in our day, we
Mhm.
would receive assignments to
Mhm.
take home and do.
Yeah.
And that's just not the reality
No.
anymore. It's them choosing not to use their time wisely, which then in turn causes them to
Yeah.
have work to do at home, or missing assignments that they, and that's another thing. Speaking of missing assignments, it's crazy that, do you know when kids are absent from school, they no longer come to you and ask you what they missed? There's none of that. They just come to school the next
Mhm.
day and
Yeah.
sit at their
Yes,
desk.
I'm
and
here.
Yeah, and they just go
entertain
along.
me.
Yeah,
Uh-huh.
exactly. And so, by the time it gets to the end of the quarter, or
Mhm.
we do grade checks, and I'm telling them they're missing assignments, then at that point, I'm like, well, how come you don't have this turned in, or where were you? And they say, well, I wasn't there that day. Well, did you come in the next day and tell me you were
Yeah.
absent the day before and ask me what
Yeah.
you missed? No. Well, why
Mhm.
not?
Yeah.
It's just little things like that.
You
It
got to
just
put some effort out.
Exactly. The kids
Mhm.
are not giving
Mhm.
enough energy and care
Right.
about what's really happening and
Mhm.
going on to even
And like you say, there's no consequences and there's no backup from a lot of the parents too. The
Correct.
parents, because I remember, oh my God, so many stories, but I remember so many times, if I would have a parent teacher conference, because
Mhm.
I've done Title I schools. I also worked at a charter school as well.
Mhm.
And I remember, parents saying, what I should do, because I had to do accommodations because my
Yes.
kids were a different sort, consultative special ed.
Uh-huh.
They were like Asperger's, so a lot of these kids had a higher IQ than I do, which probably isn't saying a lot sometimes.
Yeah.
But what do you mean?
Yeah, well, I mean, it depends on what day we catch you on, right?
Right. And how many cups of coffee I've been drinking. But they would be, parents would be adamant, like, well, you should do this, and my kid needs that, and I have to, and then I would stop. I say, you know what would be really great? You come into the classroom,
There you go.
and you don't even have to help out, but you
Just
can observe.
Yep.
Because I did inclusion
Mhm.
teaching, so I'd have my little 12 or 13 kids, and then I'd have, the rest of the kids with another teacher. I'd say, you come on in and just make yourself at home, and then you'll see how we run our classroom.
Absolutely.
And I'm thinking before you start criticizing me about it or the other teachers,
Mhm.
because this is not a private school. I had told one parent, I said, this is not a private school. We can't do one-on-one to just your child as much as
That's what
I-
tutoring's for.
yeah,
And they don't take advantage of
No.
those resources either.
yeah.
We have tutoring in the library. We have after school program tutoring. We have even tutoring.com, which is given to them for free.
Yeah, see?
And we never had that when I
Yeah.
was in school.
Mhm.
And so there are so many avenues of getting that one-on-one.
Right.
But when you tell the kids that, they don't want, they either are self-conscious and low self-esteem about it, like they think they're too, like they don't want to be looked upon as
Yeah.
dumb or stupid for
Yeah, I know we've had that.
or it's just they don't want to waste their after school time on tutoring. They'd rather go do other things or be on their phone or friends or extracurricular activities that are outside of school.
And I will say, you were mentioning TikTok earlier.
Yes.
That, okay, I don't spend a lot of screen time because I won't, but I do listen to podcasts. I got to compare what's out there in the market to what I'm doing.
Yeah, absolutely.
But the other thing is sometimes I go on TikTok and I can see how it can draw people in.
Oh,
One time I was on it and I checked my watch and I'm like, or the clock or whatever, and I'm like, I've been on this thing for 45 minutes.
Easily.
And I don't let myself do that because a lot of it is just flat goofy and foolish.
Yes.
But it's entertaining, especially for a teenage mind, because it's so much easier to get drawn into that than it is to, have to sit down and write an essay, not using GPT.
Chat GPT. Which makes our jobs really difficult, by the way.
Yeah. Oh, I know that's right.
Because it's very difficult to know. Well, I say it's difficult to know. It's not difficult to know because you have 15-year-olds that in some cases can barely read and write. In some cases, it's worse than it's ever been now post-COVID.
Yeah.
And then they come in one day with a well-written college
level
essay, and you're like, okay, this is not your work. And then you automatically know. But if they're smart enough to do Chat GPT or other AI programs the right way, it can be hard. It can be difficult because the plagiarism. I mean, it's hard to they don't have any sites that you can use.
Any checks and balances on that either.
Correct. It's not like plagiarism where you can tell that they copied and pasted off the internet. It's not like that.
And we were discussing this earlier. I mean, before the show, that there's just a lot of blame put on the internet about, how it's affecting kids and adults and everybody, and there's so much information and everything. But there is actually a beauty to what's available on the internet.
Oh, the resources are abundant.
It's amazing. I like to think about the positive side of the internet and how you can engage kids with some very interesting things.
Yes.
Kids' minds are, like sponges, and they really are. But it's how you direct them.
Absolutely.
So on their own, and it's just human nature that usually we're going to be drawn into, the five senses. This is going back into my psych years, of being in college and everything, the sense of taste, smell, and everything. So because we're sensual beings, basically, we're going to be drawn to something that, gives us like immediate gratification, if it's visual or whatever. But you can take those desires, which aren't all bad, and use the internet to help with education. I mean, it could be, some kids could be very interested in like metamorphosis of a butterfly or something.
And there are kids like that.
Yeah, there are.
I had a student last year. It's funny you bring up butterflies because she literally went to the library and found almost every book that she could about butterflies and different types of species and like you said, metamorphosis of it. And there are, and just talking about resources in general, when it comes to internet and just otherwise, I mean, there are lots of things that exist nowadays in not only just school libraries, but also in public libraries as well, that really just, it's a whirlwind past what I experienced in high school, probably what you experienced in high school. And the resources are so abundant. There are so many things that kids can do and use to their advantage and learn. And it really makes it, I think, a lot more fun for the kids. I think that there are things that if they would utilize them and if they would reach out, and some do, I wish a lot more did. But if they would use these things and use these resources to their advantage, they could go so far. I mean, they would be even more, catapulted into the future even more than, and like you said, they are our future. So we really need them to take advantage of these things that are available to them in order for them to go even further than what they think they can do.
Kids are really, even from the moment of birth, and of course, I've had 2 kids myself, and they are bright and beautiful. And it's like if you give them, of course, they're going to be cranky, they're going to be this, going to be that, because they're humans. But if you engage them in wondrous things and sing songs, I used to sing to them all the time, or I really did just make up these goofy little songs and tell them when they were 3 and 4 years old. I would tell them little stories about, just to, and you'd see their eyes, they go like this, I mean,
Sometimes I don't have a good singing voice, but sometimes I sing things like instructions to them because I'm like, maybe if I change it up, they'll listen. Like maybe they'll tune in. And it's funny that you bring up songs because I don't know if you remember, but I actually introduced some of the things that I learned whenever I was in, even I would say elementary and middle school was the Schoolhouse Rock. Do you remember Schoolhouse Rock?
The movie?
Yeah, the movie
The Jack
show,
Black?
whatever it was.
Jack Black?
I think so. And the main one that
Mhm.
I do, because I'm an English teacher, is the conjunction junction, what's
Oh,
your
yeah,
function?
yeah.
And I played it for them.
Mhm.
And they're high school kids. So
Yeah.
normally, and I warned them well before I played this. I'm like, listen, this is not your rap music that you're listening to these days. This is no Cardi B. This isn't Rod Wave. Like, this isn't. But they actually engaged in it. I mean, they were paying attention.
Yeah.
It's a cartoon. It's conjunction junction, what's your function? And they actually were like tapping their fingers and tapping their toes, and they were engaged in it. And they I would even catch 1 or 2 of them still kind of humming this tune after it was over.
Yeah.
And so it just goes to show some of those old tricks from
they still work.
tools from back, they still work. They still can be put into play. And I think teachers need to remember that. What worked for us when we were young can still work for the young people today.
I believe it.
Yeah.
And I believe there was more compassion and more joy in teaching. I mean, I just know it. I
Yeah,
remember
there
my
was.
teachers,
Me
every
too.
single one
Yeah,
of them.
I do too. I do too.
And the ones that just, they'd say, well, today we're going to learn about something so exciting. I mean, they just would, exude this excitement. Even the kids that struggled would get involved on some level. There was a lot of just general wisdom and sense of enthusiasm. We didn't have this weight on our shoulders. I'm talking about men, women, children, teachers, pastors, it was just happier times. So I'm not suggesting that we, go back and try to relive the past. I'm just suggesting that let's take some of that energy and some of the tried and true things that actually worked and try to implement them into the classroom today.
Yeah, absolutely.
So,
And a lot of teachers are doing that. There are some teachers that are really,
retro.
that are a little retro. But another thing that I've observed that's different from whenever I was in even high school is that the teachers are younger now than they've ever been, in my opinion. I remember in high school, I maybe had like 1 or 2 young teachers.
Yeah.
And when I say young, I mean probably they may have been in their 20s or 30s. The rest of the teachers that I had were mostly older. They were either in their 40s or 50s or 60s.
Because they taught for life. They would be.
Yes, that's true.
That's why, not to interrupt, but they would set up the TRS, which is Teacher Retirement System, right?
Yes.
And now you don't have very many teachers. See, for some people, whether it's interesting or not, if you teach for your lifetime and you decide to be a teacher for the rest of your life, you have TRS, you don't have Social Security.
Correct.
Social Security is not put into the system like it would be if you were working anywhere else, like Walmart or IBM or,
That's correct.
So,
Yeah.
so that's one reason why they would stay there forever. Plus they loved teaching.
Yeah, they did.
Back then.
And nowadays it's, even like I said, younger. I feel like teachers are getting younger and younger. We actually had a new teacher join us this year who just graduated from this same high school in 2019.
Wow.
And he's now a teacher in 2023. So that just goes to show,
That's a 4-year degree then.
Yeah. And that just goes to show how much it should be even easier for the kids to connect, to have that relatability, and to keep things fresh, keep things fresh and vibrant and really have that high energy level.
Encouraging.
Encouraging.
Yeah.
And so Yeah, things are definitely different now
Mhm.
than I think they really ever have been when it comes to the classroom.
Yeah, it
Mhm.
is totally different.
Yeah.
I am happy that you are, not only aware of all these things, but also that you're implementing a lot of your own personal wisdom into it and you're encouraging because I
Mhm.
really don't believe that a lot of kids are benefiting from a lot of their teachers in the way that they are from you. And it's not to downgrade teachers. The thing is
Mhm.
that it's harder on those teachers that are at that point. Let's say they're 45 years old, 50 years
Mhm.
old or whatever, and
Yeah.
they're used to the first 20 years this other way, and then all of a sudden everything's changed up and they won't get the support from the parents. So, the earliest age of retirement where you get your TRS is 59 and a half.
Mhm.
And there's been such a turnover of
There
that.
has been.
Uh-huh.
There has been.
Yeah.
I think that that's something that will help benefit the kids
Mhm.
is to have this younger, I don't even want to call it a generation, but
Mhm.
just this younger set
Yeah.
of teachers. I have a Tupac and Snoop Dogg poster hanging in
Uh-huh.
my room.
Uh-huh.
I could never imagine walking into one of my classrooms in high school and having
Mhm.
a teacher have a Tupac
Uh-huh.
and Snoop Dogg poster. It would have been the coolest thing. I mean, that right there is enough to
Yeah.
engage me
Right.
personally. I
Yeah.
would have a whole conversation with my
Mhm.
teacher at that point. So yeah, it's and also I tend to use a lot of what I call teacherisms, which are just like little quips and sayings that
Mhm.
I've learned. My father is also a high school teacher and a high school basketball coach,
Right.
much like myself.
Mhm.
I kind of walked in his shoes,
Mhm.
and he taught me a lot of things, and he would say a lot of things, especially during basketball, that I use to this day.
Wow.
And they are really great.
Mhm.
One of them is when a student or a student athlete says, I can't do something, whatever it may be. I say, don't tell me what you can't do. Show me what you can.
Right.
It's one of those things that's
Mhm.
like, don't tell me that you can't do it. Show me anything that you
Yeah.
can do,
Mhm.
and we'll work with you
Yeah,
from that
that's the
point.
starting point.
Exactly.
And that's very rational thinking.
Yes.
But yet you don't hear that much,
You don't
It's
hear
like
these things that much.
instead people really are in attacking mode nowadays.
Mhm.
I'm very sensitive to that. I mean, I'm a psych major, so I'm always
Yeah.
analyzing, why would you say that? Where did that come from? Is it from your youth? Is it from a trauma or whatever? But
Yeah.
unfortunately, there is people are like real thin-skinned and everything.
Mhm.
But that's really good. My dad taught us, and I still say it. In fact, I've said it to my students too. Results, not excuses.
There you
But
go.
Miss Durian, blah blah blah.
Yeah.
Results, not excuses. I want to see the results. I don't want
Yeah.
any excuses. You
Yeah.
know.
Yeah. That's similar. Yeah.
Yeah.
Very much so.
And I try to live by that myself, even now.
Yeah.
I still,
Yeah.
because it lasts and lasts.
Yes. Yeah. Some of these things are timeless,
Yeah.
and they can just be used over and over again, and
Yeah.
it's a staple in
Hmm.
their lives. And some of the things like that, these teacherisms that we say to kids, they'll never forget.
Hmm.
Some students will never forget. And it'll be instilled in them, and they can use them whenever
Right.
they become adults
Hmm.
or they have kids of their own as well.
Yeah.
Yeah, for sure.
Hopefully, and pass that down.
Hmm.
Oh, Lord help us.
Yeah. It's not easy. It's not easy. Another day, another dollar, as I say.
And as we would say in Atlanta, Lord help
Lord.
us.
Yeah.
LAWD.
Yeah, Lord
is-
help us. Yep, absolutely.
So this has been just exuberating. Now I'm ready to go start a whole new career going back to teaching.
Go back into the classroom.
Yeah.
Hey, we could use you.
I know.
I'm not gonna lie.
The only thing is I'm not with it IT wise. They would just eat me up alive. In that way I would,
Yeah, that's true.
because,
It does advance. The
Mhm.
technology has
Yeah.
very much advanced. So
I know how to use the tablet, but anyway, I'm
yeah.
doing this. I'm teaching from, instead of a pulpit in a schoolroom, I am teaching, or a classroom. This is my classroom.
Absolutely.
My viewers.
Absolutely. And we appreciate you as well, because
Ah,
we're able to talk about these types of things
yeah,
that need to be discussed more, and to join the conversation.
join the conversation.
Absolutely.
We are so pleased that you've come into our studio, and hopefully you've gained some wisdom from what we've shared. And if you have any questions or comments, you can go directly to my website, join the conversation with summerkeith.com. Let us know what you think, good or bad. I'm going to ignore any.
Ignore the bad stuff.
Yeah, ignore it. I don't have time for that. But if you have something to say, or even if you are a potential guest, if you are someone who also has been in education, someone who has been in counseling, a doctor, I'm looking for an endocrinologist. That's the truth. I want to talk about endocrinology and how hormones and everything affect us. Anyway, hit us up on our website and let me know, because we want you to join the conversation.